Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're actually starting a brand new book. This is volume 13, titled Generosity. This is where you learn about the practice of generosity, helping you to understand what the Buddha is teaching you is to enhance the quality of the mind by training the mind to practice generosity. Because of craving, desire, attachment in the mind's holding on and craving permanence, not being willing to give and share with other people. The mind thinks if I spend 3 hours doing this, I want this in return. Or if I spend 3 days doing this, I want this in return. And just like an animal, the unenlightened human mind functions very much like an animal. We're not animals, we're human beings. But in the animal realm and all the animal existence, we were hoarding things. We were hoarding our food and hoarding our resources and growling and roaring at other animals when they came close by. But now that we're in the human realm, the unenlightened mind oftentimes retains that type of thinking and that type of functioning. And now in the unenlightened state, an individual might hoard things as part of its craving, desire, attachment, and holding on to things. But because we're in the human realm, we can evolve past that and train the mind to let go, which is ultimately going to help us to get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, the enlightened mental state. So while the Buddha teaches meditation and many other techniques of how to train the mind to let go, he's also using generosity because he could see in his current life and in his previous lives, he practiced a significant amount of generosity. And that's what led to him being able to get to enlightenment, among other things, because it trained his mind to let go. So that's why he teaches it as part of the path, because he knew that's what led to his enlightenment. So in order for you to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice generosity as well. But you're going to need to do this from the middle way. Whereas if you were practicing generosity extensively and overextending yourself, sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources exorbitantly, you're not going to have the things that you need in order to sustain your life. But if you're all the way on the other side, where you were not sharing at all, the mind would be quite selfish. So you're going to need to come to the middle where you're willing to live joyfully, giving and sharing with others around you. And this is going to train your mind to let go. So we've got a whole series of discourses here in this particular book where the Buddha is helping you to see various aspects of generosity. It's important that you don't look at any one particular teaching in isolation, because it's the totality of the teachings that are going to help bring your mind to the understanding of generosity and what the Buddha is teaching you here. He's teaching you to give and share more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. This is what's going to help train your mind to let go. He's teaching you to enhance the quality of your mind through the practice of generosity. That's the only goal of generosity. If there's any expectation or anything you want because of practicing of generosity, then the mind's not practicing generosity because there's still craving there. So you need to get to the point where you're practicing generosity to the point where you don't even have a desire or a craving or a longing or yearning or a want or an expectation of a thank you. Of course, when you practice generosity, some people are going to say thank you and some people aren't, right? That's impermanence. But you need to get to the point where you don't even have an expectation that someone's going to say thank you, that you're just willing to give and share without any expectations whatsoever. So I'm going to start this class in the same way that we always do, which is inviting people in Zoom to be able to read one of the chapters. We're going to study the 10 chapters today from chapter 1 through chapter 10. And after a student reads the chapter, then I'm going to share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to what's been shared. If you have questions in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can actually put that in the comments section and I'll be able to see that. If you're in Zoom, you can ask questions or volunteer to read by electronically raising your hand, unmuting your microphone, and then asking any and all questions that you like or volunteering to read that way. So let me see if there's anyone who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter. This first chapter is titled Giving. Okay, it looks like Leo's volunteering. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I hope my internet is good. It's not the best internet right now, so I hope it's enough. Giving. But here, student, some man or woman gives food, drink, clothing, carriages, garlands, scents, ointments, beds, dwelling, and lamps to ascetics or Brahmins. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then wherever he is born, he is wealthy.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So here, this is the Buddha describing somebody giving offerings to ascetics and Brahmins. Of course, ascetics are ordained practitioners. Brahmin, we could think of those as Hindu priests. These are individuals who are looking to help others through what it is that they're sharing. And what the Buddha is saying is that if you share with these individuals, that at the time of death, there's the potential for a rebirth in this heavenly world. But if you come back to the human state, then this individual can be wealthy. It's important to understand that this isn't the goal of the teachings of the Buddha, to be reborn in the heavenly world or to be reborn in the human world and be wealthy. That's not what he's actually guiding you to be able to understand here. He's helping you to be able to see this cause and effect, or this action and result. Remember, it's important to not look at any one teaching of the Buddha in isolation. You need to be able to look at the totality of his teachings on something like generosity and all of his other teachings to be able to understand what he's sharing with you here. What he ultimately is teaching you in the totality of his teachings is to practice generosity for the giving and sharing to enhance the quality of the mind, which brings down your level of craving, desire, attachment in your mind. As you're doing that, the mind's getting closer and closer to enlightenment. Your mind is also experiencing less and less discontentedness. And of course, there's other things you would need to be practicing besides just generosity. You would need the entire Eightfold Path to be able to reduce and eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and ultimately get to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state. But the same things that are leading to enlightenment, if you fall short of that, it can lead to rebirth in the heavenly world, or if you come back in the world, it can lead to certain beneficial results in the human world. Because while wealth is not going to lead to your happiness, that's not what's going to produce happiness. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as a rich person killing themselves. There's plenty of rich people who commit suicide because they're having painful feelings and they're not happy, right? So it's not money and wealth and fame and fortune that's going to lead to your happiness. But it does provide you a certain ability to learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Because if you didn't have money and you didn't have the ability to eat and buy clothing and shelter and medical care and things like this, you'd be basically living paycheck to paycheck, and you wouldn't have time to attend classes like this. You wouldn't have time to read books. You wouldn't necessarily have time to meditate and things of this nature, because you would just be essentially surviving and looking for your next meal. So by having wealth, if someone was born into wealth, for example, that gives them a certain obstacle that they don't have to overcome, right? That they've now eliminated that particular obstacle. But whether someone chooses to use that time to grow and develop is a whole nother question. But having wealth can actually help you to overcome the ability to have to look for your next meal and where that's coming from and worry about that. So here, this is just one particular teaching of the Buddha helping you to be able to understand that, yeah, somebody practicing generosity in the direction of an ascetic or a Brahmin, it's helping to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment, which is ultimately what he's guiding you to do to get to enlightenment. But if you fall short of that, then there's this potential rebirth in the heavenly realm or coming back into the human realm and being wealthy, where you would have a better opportunity perhaps to be able to get to enlightenment. But it's also important to remember that rebirth in the heavenly realm is not ideal. That's not an ideal existence. The heavenly realm is not permanent. Those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth. They still need to get to enlightenment, and they're oftentimes complacent because they're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. In the human state, we experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So therefore, we tend to have built-in motivation to be able to progress on the path to enlightenment, because we don't like those painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant. We don't like those. So we have built-in motivation to be able to aspire for something better than what you're currently experiencing. Where in the heavenly realm, because they only experience exclusively pleasant feelings, they tend to lack motivation and diligence and determination to get to enlightenment, where they're oftentimes complacent. So while this is a possibility that the Buddha is describing, it's not what you would aspire for. What you would aspire for is getting to enlightenment now in this life by training of your mind. And that's where the next chapter you're going to see is really important, where the Buddha talks about what is accomplishment in generosity, because that's ultimately what you would like to be practicing. But this particular discourse is helping you to understand a certain aspect of your generosity, to be able to share with ascetics and Brahmins, people who are sharing the teachings and helping the world to understand the wisdom of how to become a better and better human being. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one? This is another short one. Okay, Alberto or Martha, go ahead, guys.
Okay, what is accomplishment? What is accomplishment of generosity? And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a noble disciple resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So this is what you would ultimately like to be practicing. In order to be able to get to even the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to be practicing the accomplishment in generosity. You're going to see that in the words of the Buddha, where he helps you to be able to understand that its accomplishment in generosity is one of the things that's going to help you to get to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment itself. You're going to need to practice a certain amount of generosity throughout your life. Again, if you practice generosity extensively and you're overexerting yourself, then you're not going to have the needs met that you have in terms of your food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But if you are all the way on the other side, where you weren't sharing with others at all, the mind's going to be quite selfish. And there, your mind's stuck. In either one of these situations, you're not actually making wise decisions that is taking you closer and closer to enlightenment. So to be able to practice this middle way and make your way to enlightenment, you're going to need to be practicing accomplishment and generosity. Even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to be practicing accomplishment and generosity. And what this is that you understand that this mind in the unenlightened state with its craving, desire, attachment is going to tend to hold on to things and really hoard things and crave things, very much like an animal, as I shared at the beginning. We're not animals, we're human beings, but the unenlightened mind oftentimes functions like an animal, holding on to things, hoarding, growling and roaring at others when they try to take something that you have. Right? So the mind needs to be willing to freely give, living open-handedly, and be joyful in giving and sharing with others. That the mind is not selfish, but you're also not overexerting yourself and sharing with so much over exuberance that your mind doesn't have the things that you need, and you haven't practiced in such a way that you're acquiring the resources that you need in order to sustain your life. So practicing the middle way, where you have accomplishment and generosity, where you're giving and sharing with others, where you're making wise decisions about that, is what you're going to need to be able to do. And this is training your mind to let go, enhancing the quality of your mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to chapter 3. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, go ahead, Leo.
A directly visible fruit of giving related to future lives. Is it possible, Venerable Sir, to point out a directly visible fruit of giving? It is Sisha. First, a donor Sisha, a generous giver, is dear and agreeable to many people. This is a directly visible fruit of giving. Second, again, wholesome persons go in large numbers to a donor, a generous giver. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. 3, again, a donor, a generous giver, acquires a wholesome reputation. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. 4, again, whatever assembly a donor, generous giver approaches, whether of Khatriyas, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics, he approaches it confidently and composed. This too is a directly visible fruit of giving. 5. Again, with the breakup of the body after death, a donor, a generous giver, is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. This is a fruit of giving related to future lives.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So we might think about this particular discourse as, what are the benefits of giving, right? You need to be able to practice generosity without any expectation of anything in return, and that you're not practicing generosity in order to get these benefits. But remember, what the Buddha is doing is he's helping you to be able to see this cause and effect relationship based in the decisions that you're making. That's the natural law of karma. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, you're cultivating wisdom about this natural law of karma. So as it relates to generosity, he's teaching you the cause and effect, the action and result. What is the result of your generosity? But then, of course, he teaches you to practice generosity without any expectation of anything in return. Because if you have an expectation, even a thank you of when you're practicing generosity, you're not practicing pure generosity, and you actually won't see these benefits. But if you understand these benefits, when you're practicing generosity without any expectation of anything in return, now when these things are occurring, you're like, oh, I see the natural law of karma. I see it more clearly. Practicing generosity, it's producing these things. So I'm going to go through these so that you understand them one by one, because some of them are pretty clear, but others maybe not. So this first one is a generous giver is dear and agreeable to many people. Well, if you went into your office and you were giving out donuts and bagels and fruit and things like this to your coworkers, you're going to be dear and agreeable to many people, right? Now, that's your generosity. You're not trying to get people to be thinking of you as dear and agreeable, but that is what's going to happen. You can see that cause and effect, right? But if you go in there with a big dozen of donuts and you're wanting people to treat you in a certain way, and that's the reason why you're making the offering of giving people donuts, that's not pure generosity yet. So you're not going to see this. But if you're just practicing generosity because you know that it's enhancing the quality of your mind and training your mind to let go, and now you're giving and sharing at work, or in your neighborhood with your neighbors, or things like this with your friends and family, you're going to see that you're dear and agreeable to many people, right? So this is something you can see very clearly through the natural law of karma. Again, wholesome persons go in large numbers to a donor, a generous giver, right? You're going to have many people who are interested in being around you when you're generous. Again, that shouldn't be your goal, but you're going to need to be able to see this is the case. Because if you have many people around you tugging and pulling and trying to get you to practice generosity, you need to be able to have the wisdom of that's why that is occurring. And maybe you do practice generosity in certain situations, and other situations you don't, because you're not interested in people getting attached to your generosity. So say, for example, if you have a neighbor and you mowed their lawn for them, every single week or every single month, and they get attached to you mowing their lawn, then they don't know how to do it themselves, right? And they don't have other means to actually accomplish that. And now they're attached to you, and you are impermanent in their life. So if they get attached to you mowing their lawn every month or every week, now they don't have other ways of accomplishing that. So people are going to come in large numbers towards you if you're practicing generosity. And now you need to be able to manage this so that you're not allowing people to have craving, desire, attachment, tugging and pulling at your generosity. And you should be able to see this, that people are maybe making demands of you or becoming discontent when you don't practice generosity with them. And that's how you know that their mind's attached to your generosity. Then the third one here is a donor, a generous giver, acquires a wholesome reputation. You can see that very clearly, too, through the natural law of karma, that if you went into work, again, giving out donuts and bagels and fruit, you're going to have a wholesome reputation. Same thing in your neighborhood and amongst your family. Again, this shouldn't be your goal. This isn't what you're trying to accomplish, but this is what will occur because of the natural law of karma. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to do, is understand this natural law of karma. So you need to practice generosity without any expectation of anything in return. And then fourth, whatever assembly a donor, a generous giver approaches, whether Khatiyas, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics, he approaches it confidently and composed. Let's talk about what these four types of people are first, and then I'll explain to you what he's describing to you here. The Khatiyas are a population of people that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha who were practicing these teachings pretty closely without the Buddha having even ever taught them. because these are the natural laws and people can learn this wisdom in different ways. So they were practicing to a certain extent good, wholesome moral conduct. The Buddha almost kind of held these people up, almost like the ideal society during his lifetime, that these people were practicing the teachings very closely. You might think about that as the way that, I kind of talk about Thai people from time to time. I talk about how they're practicing the teachings very closely. But of course, there are certain people here that don't practice the teachings. It's not a perfect society, but indeed they are practicing the teachings pretty closely. So the Khattiyas were that for during the lifetime of the Buddha. And those individuals are doing wholesome things. They were very wholesome people. Then there's Brahmins, who are Hindu priests, who were also practicing a certain amount of wholesomeness. Sure, they were doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer, which wasn't leading to people's improvement in their day-to-day life, but they were teaching a certain amount of moral conduct and trying to help people the best that they could. So they were considered wholesome people during the lifetime of the Buddha. And then householders or household practitioners who are choosing to practice the teachings of the Buddha from the household life. And now those people are practicing a certain amount of wholesomeness through their wise decisions. An ascetic, we might refer to this as an ordained practitioner nowadays, where this individual has decided to give up worldly life, enter into a life of homelessness, and train their mind to get as close to enlightenment as possible, if not enlightened, and then potentially share those teachings with other people. So these people are wholesome as well. So when there's wholesome people, and there's someone who approaches wholesome people who they know themselves they are doing unwholesome things, their mind will be shaken up. They will lack confidence. They will be unsteady and unstable because their mind knows that they're unwise and they know that they're doing unwholesome things. So now when they approach people who are doing wholesome things, their mind feels almost guilty or shameful in that situation. You might have had this kind of going on at different times in your life when you've been doing a lot of unwholesome things, that when you approach wholesome people, your mind's shaken up, lacking confidence and composure, right? So what the Buddha is sharing here is that somebody who understands the practice of generosity, who's working on eliminating craving, desire, attachment, building wholesomeness in their life, when they approach wholesome people who are doing wholesome things, they do so with confidence and they're composed, their mind's stable and steady, because they know that they're doing wise things and they're doing wholesome things. And now they're approaching people who are doing things similarly. But people who are doing unwise things and are unwholesome, they're going to have a certain amount of conceit in their mind. They're going to be measuring and comparing, right? That's thinking that you're either superior to people or inferior to people. And this person who's doing unwise and unwholesome things, when they come around people who are doing wholesome things, their mind's going to measure and compare themselves. And they're typically going to put themselves below those people who are doing wholesome things. And now they're lacking confidence and they're lacking composure of their mind. But for someone who's practicing generosity and understands the purpose and the reason of what that's all about, giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, they have certain enhancement of mind, that they're eliminating their cravings, desires, attachments. Sure, they might still have conceit in their mind, but they understand that they're doing wholesome things and they can approach this group of people that are doing wholesome things confidently and composed. That's what he's explaining here, that this is part of your wholesome karma as a result of choosing to practice generosity. Then the fifth one is at the breakup of the body after death, a donor, a generous giver, is reborn in a good destination, a heavenly world. Again, you're going to see this from time to time when the Buddha is teaching not just about generosity, but about wholesome moral conduct too. But the reason why this rebirth in the heavenly world is occurring is because there's less pollution in the mind. Or if somebody comes back to the human realm, they'll be reborn in an improved destination, right? That's not the ultimate goal of what the Buddha is teaching you to accomplish. He's teaching you to eliminate discontentedness and get to enlightenment. That's very clear in his teachings. But the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that lead to rebirth, either in the heavenly world or in the human world in an improved rebirth. So he's always going to essentially help you to understand that as part of the natural law of karma, as part of choosing to practice good, wholesome moral conduct, or in this case, generosity, that it's leading to the reduction of pollution in your mind. Thus, if you are reborn, there's going to be a rebirth either in the heavenly world or the human world, potentially, depending on what the status of your mind is at the time of death. So this is essentially the benefits of giving, helping you to understand the fruit or the benefits of practicing generosity in your day-to-day life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which this next one is actually very similar to the one we just read. So I don't know that we need to actually read this. This one is helping people to understand that the benefits of giving is that you're dear and agreeable to many people. That's the first one. Wholesome persons go in large numbers to you. That's from the last one as well. One acquires a wholesome reputation. That's from the last one as well. One is not deficient in householder duties. What the Buddha is talking about here is that if you're understanding your role in terms of a community of practitioners, there's the ordained practitioners and people who are teachers and sharing the teachings who've given up worldly life, and they're no longer pursuing careers and trying to enrich themselves through any type of thing like that. Instead, they've decided to let go of that life and just focus on training their own mind and sharing the teachings with other people. And then there's household practitioners who are also interested in getting to enlightenment. They're choosing to continue to work, but they're actually sharing some of their resources with this other group of people, the teachers and the ordained practitioners, to allow them to get as close to enlightenment or enlightenment itself, so that then they can help these individuals. So householder duties are things like, of course, cleaning your home, taking care of your home, things of this nature, but also helping to create this womb that ordained practitioners and teachers can reside within to be able to help each individual person to be able to get to enlightenment. If you're paying attention to your generosity and you understand the benefits of that, and you're practicing wise decision making towards practicing generosity, not just with teachers and ordained practitioners, but other people in your life too, if you're attentive to that, you will also be attentive to these other duties too, of keeping your home clean and well organized and things of this nature, and also helping to ensure that there's this womb available for people to be able to reside within and be able to share the teachings. So this is something unique comparative to that previous discourse. And then the fifth one here is with the breakup of the body after death, one is reborn in the destination of the heavenly world. So the Buddha is saying these are the 5 benefits, right? So whenever you see him talking about benefits or any kind of list of things, you should never look at it in isolation, because that last discourse has one thing that's different than this discourse. So he's not saying this is the only 5 benefits. This is just 5 benefits that he's happened to be talking about at that moment in time. So here we've got a total already of 6 benefits that he's talking about. And you haven't even seen all of them yet, because he's going to talk about enhancement of the mind and all these other benefits too. So now between these 2 discourses, we have 6 benefits that he's talking about, right? And then now he kind of summarizes that again down here. And then he talks about it down here as well, that an individual who is essentially in this womb receiving offerings from household practitioners, that once they've understood the teachings, that they're helping others to also dispel discontentedness through training of their mind. So this is the Buddha talking about this womb that household practitioners are creating for ordained practitioners and teachers to be able to reside within, so that then as their wisdom grows and develops, they can offer that wisdom to other people. And this is what helps an entire population of people, an entire community move forward in life. If there wasn't the ability for people to step away from their career and stuff like that in order to be able to understand the teachings deeply and devote 100% of their time to that, then the teachings wouldn't be vibrant in the world to be shared with other people. So let me know if you guys have questions here. This is the 5 benefits of giving, but it's not the only 5 benefits of giving. Okay, looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to go back to where you said in the chapter before that being generous, that we need to be careful that people don't get attached to that generosity. Just see that for example, I'm in Chiang Mai right now, and when I eat in this one place every day almost, and I got the habit to give a little bit more every time. And now I did it once now I gave a little bit less. A few days ago I gave a little bit less, and today I gave the normal price. Would you extend this, that I give maybe for the next 2, 3, 4 days the normal price, and then go back to do a little bit of generosity? Or I thought about that tomorrow if I eat there, I give a little tip again. But now that you mentioned this, I thought about maybe I should extend it. I'm not sure if they are attached to it, but I think they got used to it, that I always gave a little bit more. And it might be a perception. It seemed like that they were well used to it. What do you think here?
Yeah, it's actually good. It's actually good for your mind and the mind of the people in that restaurant that you introduce impermanence, not only with your tipping and whether or not you give a tip or not, but also the locations that you eat at. In Thailand here, this is something that you can do because people who work in restaurants and who are servers, they actually get a full salary. They actually are not dependent on their tips. Where places like America, if you didn't tip somebody, they wouldn't be able to earn money, right? Because the system in America is set up very different. So in America, for me, I would tip in those places because I know how important it is for those people to earn a living. And I make sure that I tip regularly whenever I'm in a place like America where the workers are dependent on the tips for their livelihood. Where here in Thailand, I know they get a full salary and they're well taken care of. They're not dependent on tips. So it's wise for you to be able to ensure that you're introducing some impermanence for your own mind so that sometimes you tip and sometimes you don't tip. That's good for your mind to be comfortable with that. It's also good when you're interacting with other people so that you don't know for yourself whether they're attached to that tip or not, but it ensures that you're functioning in a way that it doesn't allow their mind to get attached to the tipping that you're doing. And then since you're eating at that restaurant regularly, it's also helpful for your mind to go eat other places too and train your mind to not just eat at one place all the time. So this is the type of impermanence that you would like to insert into your life and ensuring that your mind and the people around you don't actually get attached to it. I think you guys all know that I share some of the donations that I receive in different places. Like one of the things I do is I give money to the temple that I spend time at, and they've offered this classroom for me to teach at. I know that they need to still pay electric and water and things like this. So I practice generosity with them, but it's different every single time. I don't have a set amount that I always give them. I change it all the time. And sometimes it's like, like really silly numbers, like it's not even like, 6,000 baht or something like that. It might be 6,212 baht, right? And then the next time it might be 4,822 baht. And then the next time it might be something else, right? And I'm like changing it around all the time to not allow their mind to actually get attached to it, because I know I need to give them something, or else it would just be us taking their resources without actually helping them. And then, of course, I do other side projects too, where I replace carpets for them, or, we do maintenance and care of the temple, where we're raking and sweeping and pulling weeds and cleaning things up like this. So there's lots of things you can do to practice generosity. There's a person here that comes here and actually cleans our home, and it's only like $17 per visit for her to come, and it gives us time to now focus on helping the students. So she comes like once a week to help us clean, and this is a very reasonable cost for us, and it helps me to be able to help the students. So I will tip her occasionally. I don't tip her every single time, but I will tip her, and it moves around all the time. And there's times where I might not tip her for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and making sure that her mind's not attached. And then sometimes I don't even give her money. I'll give her fruit, or I'll give her, like, maybe we have some clothes here that maybe her or her family could wear, and we give them that instead. So you can look at your generosity as more than just money, and you can look at your generosity as something that you need to practice for yourself, but you would also like to make sure people don't get attached to it by introducing some impermanence in the things that you do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Just about the that you said that it's also making sure that I not get attached to the place. I have 2 places I go in Chiang Mai to eat mainly, and the reason is mainly, I would say, because of the big meal. Because in Thailand, sometimes the meals are too small for me, too little, and they make quite good big meals, and it's quite cheap. So I can give these tips, right? And I still have the feeling that my money is, I can take care of my money. So that is the main reason, I would say. But yeah, so there might be attachment to always have a big meal and don't pay too much, maybe. But yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I'll share this with you that one of the things that you'll learn if you ever learn about financial investing, they teach you to diversify your money, right? Because if you have all your money in one place and something goes wrong with that investment, now all your money's gone, right? So they teach you to diversify your investments. Someone might have 10, 12, 20, 100 different investments as they're investing money. So that way, if one particular one isn't performing very well, you have all the other ones to perform as well. Well, it's the same thing as it comes to you acquiring the basic necessities that you need to sustain your life. You would like to diversify this. You wouldn't like to have just one grocery store that you always go to, and that provides you all the things that you need in order to sustain your life, or one or two restaurants that you go to exclusively in order to be able to sustain your life, because these things are all impermanent in your life. Your mind can easily get attached to them, but also those places can go out of business. They can close for extended periods of time, like floods and stuff like this. And now your mind's having to figure out where you're going to go for food. So if you've got 5, 10 different places where you can acquire the resources that you need, like food, now if one particular one is closed or it goes out of business or what have you, your mind easily has other opportunities and you can be at ease. You can be like, oh, this place is closed. Now I need to just go over here. And you can rest and be at ease because you've already got multiple options for you. Whereas if you only have 1 or 2 places that you're going to eat, when one place isn't functioning because it'll sometimes be closed or go out of business, now your mind is maybe struggling with that impermanence. So the way that you get ahead of this is in all the different things that you need and that you acquire for life, you would like to be able to have other means of acquiring that. So even like the things that I just mentioned, like, of course, this person who comes to clean our house, she is impermanent. She actually didn't come last week. So we needed to clean ourselves, right? We know how to clean our house ourselves. So we clean our house ourselves sometimes. So you would like to be able to have multiple means of acquiring what it is that you need to acquire in life, because if you're dependent on any 1 or 2 particular places, that's another word for craving, desire, attachment, is there's a dependency there. And you would like to get rid of all those dependencies. Even, for example, like if you were in a life partner relationship where you have a husband or a wife or 2 husbands or 2 wives, and they're living together and they're maybe sharing resources. Sometimes the mind can be dependent on the other person for money. And now the person has difficulties and struggles in this relationship because they're dependent on each other. Where you would like to get to the point where, sure, you share with each other, you share resources with each other, but you're not dependent on each other. You can operate independently of each other. And this is going to help you to get to more peace and more joy, where your mind isn't bound up in your relationships or the things that you choose to do in day-to-day life.
Okay, I see that. In this particular situation, not sure if I see it there, because actually sometimes the shops or the food stores were closed. Right, I were driving there and I saw they're closed because of some days they closed, whatever. And I didn't saw a lot of discontentedness there. I'm not even sure if there was discontentedness. So I just went somewhere else. What I wanted to say also, I forgot. But yeah, that's it, I think.
This is where your practice needs to come in, that you need to be able to see what I'm sharing with you, and you need to be able to think about that, reflect on that, and see how unwise it is to just have 1 or 2 places that you can acquire food from. And you need to just be able to see and practice being joyful and peaceful going other places. Whether you get discontent with a particular place or two at this particular point, that's for you to look at and for you to understand and figure out. But what I'm sharing with you is that it's unwise to just have 1 or 2 places like this where you'd like to diversify more fully. And now your mind can ensure that there's no craving, desire, attachment. Because some of these cravings, especially when you're first getting started on the path, like you are, Leo, they can be so buried deep in the mind that oftentimes the person's mindfulness isn't well developed to be able to see their own craving. And this is the way that you proactively ensure that there isn't any attachment, is by making sure that you have multiple places.
But isn't after craving always following discontentedness? I mean, I would see that, right? And if I drive there and I see, oh, it's closed, and okay, look somewhere else, and there's no discontentedness, then there's also no craving. Or you would say that maybe the mindfulness wasn't strong enough to see the little contentedness.
Yeah, it can be that the mindfulness isn't strong enough because there can just be a bit of annoyance just for like a split second. And the mind doesn't necessarily see that when it doesn't have really well-developed mindfulness in the mind. So you would be wise to have multiple locations to be able to acquire the basic resources. Whether you choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you to make, Leo. But what you will find is that whether it's maintaining I know you don't have a car, but whether it's maintaining your car, whether it's acquiring food, whether it's maintaining your home, any number of different things that you need assistance with in the world, you would like to have multiple places to be able to acquire that help that you need. That if you allow your mind to just constantly go to the same place all the time, you're not necessarily going to see when it's becoming discontent if your mindfulness isn't well developed, because remember, there's a spectrum of cravings, desires, attachments. There's really light ones where you want a bag of M&Ms and you go into 7-Eleven, it's not there, and you're like, they don't have my M&Ms. Oh, well, there was still some discontentedness there. There was like a half a second of discontentedness that the mind was like, they don't have my M&Ms. Oh, well, right? You might have let go right at the beginning, immediately, but there was still a little bit of discontentedness there, right? So you need to be able to see that. And oftentimes early on, the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't have that level of mindfulness, and it looks past that. And you need to be able to be diligent and be proactive to make sure you have many options to be able to acquire the things that you need.
Okay. Just one thing now, because when I'm going there and it's closed, for example, then I also cut it off, right? If there is discontentedness. Yes. I'm also training my mind to let it go in the action right now there, right? But you would say it's better still to go somewhere else, because I cannot fully distinguish this craving by just always cutting it off in the moment when it's shut down. Would you say that? Or?
In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to have to get ahead of the cravings. If you allow the mind to crave and to cling, you're not going to get to enlightenment. You actually need to get ahead of it. So if you, let's just say, go to the same restaurant every day, and you order the same thing every day, you're just allowing the mind to be attached. So now in the moment when you go there and they're closed and you notice discontentedness and you cut it off and let it go, okay, that's great that you're cutting it off and letting it go, but you still allowed the mind to form this craving. And that's what you're looking to do, is you're trying to get ahead of that, where you can proactively make sure that the mind isn't getting attached. So let's just say you go into a restaurant. Let's just say you have 4, 5, 6 different restaurants you go to for food. And let's just say this one restaurant, you order a chocolate cake every time you go there. And these other 6, 8 different restaurants you go to and you order different things there. Well, if you're noticing that your mind has a tendency to order this chocolate cake at this restaurant every single time you go, there's the potential that your mind has picked up a craving there and you haven't noticed it yet, because it hasn't been triggered, or it's so light that it hasn't been noticeable. So proactively, you would like to go to this restaurant and not order chocolate cakes sometimes. Even though you haven't seen any discontentedness whatsoever, you would like to proactively make sure that there's no craving there. So now you go to that restaurant, don't order your chocolate cake, even though they have a brand new, fresh one that was just made and the smell is coming out of the kitchen and it smells so delicious. Just choose not to order it and see if your mind can do that without any discontentedness. This is proactively getting ahead of it so that you don't allow your mind to form a craving, desire, attachment.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. I don't see any. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay. Alberto and Martha.
Okay. A donor who gives food gives life, beauty, peacefulness, and strength. Monks, when a donor gives food, he gives the recipients 4 things. What for? He gives life, beauty, peacefulness, and strength. 1. Having given life, he takes part in life, whether heavenly or human. 2nd, having given beauty, he takes part in beauty, whether heavenly or human. 3rd, having given peacefulness, he takes part in peacefulness, whether heavenly or human. 4th, having given strength, he takes part in strength, whether heavenly or human. Monks, a noble disciple who gives food gives the recipient these 4 things. One who respectfully gives timely food to those mentally disciplined ones who eat what others give provides them with 4 things: life, beauty, peacefulness, and strength. The man who gives life and beauty, who gives peacefulness and strength, will obtain long life and fame wherever he is reborn. Monks, a donor who gives food gives the recipients 5 things. What 5? One gives life, beauty, peacefulness, strength, and discernment. 1. Having given life, one takes part in life, whether heavenly or human. 2nd, having given beauty, one takes part in beauty, whether heavenly or human. 3rd, having given peacefulness, one takes part in peacefulness, whether heavenly or human. 4th, having given strength, one takes part in strength, whether heavenly or human. 5, having given discernment, one takes part in discernment, whether heavenly or human. A donor who gives food gives the recipients these 5 things. The wise one is a giver of life, strength, beauty, and discernment. The intelligent one is a donor of peacefulness, and in turn acquires peacefulness. Having given life, strength, beauty, peacefulness, and discernment, one is long-lived and famous wherever one is reborn.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So here, this is a really good example of how you're never interested in looking at the Buddhist teachings in isolation. Because here we have a discourse that talks about when a donor gives food, they get these 4 things, right? But then immediately after that, we have another one that says, hey, when you give food, you get these 5 things, right? So the Buddha is oftentimes talking in different situations to different people, and he's helping them to see a certain aspect of the teachings. And you need to be able to look at the totality of his teachings to be able to fully understand what it is that he's sharing with you. So when you're giving and sharing food, this is a wonderful way to practice generosity, because that's one of the big things that the unenlightened mind will tend to hoard because of our animal existences. In our animal existences, we hoarded food, right? That lion is not going to share with other lions. That snake doesn't want to share with other snakes. The squirrel doesn't want to share with other squirrels, right? It hoards food. And because all of us in this human realm have most likely been in the animal realm countless times, our consciousness tends to retain that. So we tend to hoard our food. So here in Asia, they tend to put their food in the middle, and then everybody eats a little bit of food. So if you're sitting down with 4, 6, 8 of your family members, all the food goes in the middle, and then you kind of scoop 2 or 3 spoonfuls on your plate and you eat that. And now you scoop another 2 or 3 spoonfuls on your plate and you eat that. And if everybody's doing that, at the end of this meal, this food has gradually gone down. And because of the lack of resources, maybe our family doesn't have food enough for everybody to be full at the end of this meal, but everybody at least has some food in their stomach. And this is a way of sharing food in a wise way. So you could implement this in your life, and perhaps maybe you do things this way in certain situations based on the meals that you're eating. Or say you even get a bag of potato chips and you open up your potato chips. You could send that around to all your friends if you're sitting in a circle of friends. And if the bag comes back and there's only 1 potato chip, then okay, eat your 1 potato chip and then go get another bag. No big deal, right? But what the mind's going to tend to do is hoard this food. So you would like to be able to be comfortable in giving and sharing things like food, but other things as well. So what the Buddha is saying here is that when you give food to people, you're giving life, beauty, peacefulness, and strength, because these are the things that food generates, right? And because of that, then you will also experience that as well, because whatever you give out, that's what comes back to you. And of course, your ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment. But what the Buddha is saying here, essentially, he doesn't talk about rebirth so much, but he's saying that if you're reborn, you're going to experience these particular things. And that's not the ultimate goal, but your goal is to practice generosity. And one of the things you need to practice generosity with is food, whether it's food that you put on the table and you share with everybody, or whether you purchase food and you give it away to people. This is the way that you can actually be practicing generosity to ensure that your mind's not craving or clinging or attached to food. You're going to need to practice generosity in all these different situations, particularly with food. This will help your mind a lot. So let me know what questions you guys have here on either of these two, where the Buddha is talking about someone who's giving food gives life, beauty, peacefulness, and strength. But also here he talks about discernment as well. So you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll move to the next one, which is chapter 6. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Chris, go ahead, sir.
A donor who gives medicine gives beauty, peacefulness, and strength. Brahman, there are these 10 advantages from congee, rice porridge that is very nutritious and serves the purpose of medicine. What 10? In giving congee, one gives life, one gives beauty, one gives ease, one gives strength, one gives intelligence. Congee, when it is drunk, checks hunger, keeps off thirst, regulates wind, cleanses the bladder, digests raw remnants of food. These Brahmin are the 10 advantages of congee. To the discerning who gives congee duly at the right time to one who lives on others' food, it confers 10 things on him: life and beauty, ease and strength. For him, intelligence arises from it. It dispels hunger, thirst, and wind. It cleanses the bladder. It digests food. This medicine is praised by the welfarer. Therefore, congee should be given constantly by a man interested for ease, by those aspiring to become heavenly beings, like joys, or acquiring human prosperity.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So if you guys aren't familiar with what congee is, here in Thailand, they call it jok. It's basically like rice porridge. And this is something that's eaten at different times, and you can actually get different things in this. I get it with mushrooms. Some people get it with eggs. You can put spices and herbs in it. There's usually a little bit of ginger and spring onions and things like this that you mix into it. It's really a great meal. And the Buddha really talks about this as medicine, right? That it is food, but he sees it also as medicine, because oftentimes people think about food as medicine, right? Because you could eat all kinds of unhealthy foods, and then you're going to need to take medicines later as the body's breaking down. But if you can give the body healthy food, this is essentially like medicine, because then you won't have to take medicine later. So you're going to need to take care of this body either now or later. So it's better to do that up front. So the Buddha talks about congee in a way that is, very, that this is a very wholesome thing to be able to eat. And he suggests that, this is wise to give as a food offering to people because it's healthy and it will help maintain the health of the body. And he talks about it here as regulating wind and things like this. This is how they used to talk about the body during the lifetime of the Buddha, is that there was these 4 elements. There's earth, water, wind, and fire. Where today we might talk about atoms and molecules and cells and things like this, that we know a lot deeper understanding of the physical body than they did 2,500 years ago. But this traditional system of the 4-element theory of diagnosing the body through that and then providing medicines according to that, it actually works. They still use it in traditional medicine. Like if you study traditional Thai medicine or some of these other traditional medicines in different countries, they will still use this 4-element theory. So when he talks about regulating wind, this is the movement of things through the body. So the earth elements are the solids of the body, like the teeth, the nails, the bones, the hair, things like this. But then there's the wind, which is the movement of things. So like the blood itself is the water element, but the movement of the blood is the wind element. Or the feces is the earth element, but the movement of the feces through the colon is the wind element. So any kind of movement in the body like that is the wind element. So what the Buddha is saying is this kanji helps the movement of things in the body, because kanji, not only is it rice, but there's a certain amount of liquid to it as well that kind of helps with that. And then here in Thailand, they serve this with ginger, which ginger is a hot, spicy element. That's the taste. The Thais not only have the 4-element theory for traditional medicine, but they have what's called the 10 taste system, that each individual food has a certain taste associated with it. And that particular taste regulates these 4 elements. So the hot and spicy taste actually increases fire, but it also increases wind in the body. So here in Thailand, they will tend to put a little bit of ginger in their kanji, or in their jok, their rice porridge, in order to lift up that wind element. So they like to keep their digestion very healthy, because that's what's going to help ensure that the body is making the best use of the food that it's taking in. So that's why the Thais, their food has all these different flavors in it, because it's well balanced with these different flavors based on what the body needs, based on the traditional element system of earth, water, wind, and fire. And these tastes are actually regulating that, either increasing them or decreasing them. And for some people here in Thailand who have knowledge of traditional medicine, if they know one of their elements are unbalanced, they will eat a certain food in order to, improve that, either to increase a certain element or decrease a certain element. So here the Buddha is just kind of praising this kanji as being a very helpful meal that is going to help the body to maintain its health. And of course, there's other types of food too, that you shouldn't think about this as the only thing to offer, but he's praising this as one that would be wise to offer. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular discourse. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 7. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, I think I just saw, is it Alberto and Martha again? Oh, there's Keely as well. Maybe I'll go to Keely, guys, so since she hasn't read yet.
Thank you, Teacher David. The giver of the agreeable gains the agreeable. The giver of the agreeable gains the agreeable when he gives willingly to the upright ones clothing, bedding, food and drink, and various kinds of supplies, having known the arahant to be like a field for what is relinquished and offered, not held back. The wholesome person gives what is hard to give. The giver of agreeable things gains what is agreeable. The giver of the agreeable gains the agreeable. The giver of the foremost again gains the foremost. The giver of the excellent gains the excellent. The giver of the best reaches the best state. The person who gives the best, the giver of the foremost, the giver of the excellent, is long-lived and famous, whatever he is reborn. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So while some of these chapters, some of these discourses are really focusing on giving and what you're going to experience as part of your rebirth, that is all true. But what I would like to focus on is what is happening now in this life, right? So what the Buddha is saying here is that the giver of the agreeable gains the agreeable. When he gives willingly to the upright, meaning he's talking about the people who are wholesome and doing wholesome things. He's talking about his community of people who are practicing the wise way, the straight way, the upright way, the wholesome way. One gives clothing, bedding, food, and drink, and various kinds of supplies, right? So when you're giving to these individuals who are the upright ones, the ones who have the wisdom to be able to share the teachings, he's saying, okay, this is like giving to this group of people that essentially are going to then help others to be able to get to enlightenment. And this is wise to be able to create that womb for people to be able to now reside within so that they can get closer and closer to enlightenment and share the teachings with others to be able to get to enlightenment as well. And then having known the Arahants to be like a field for what is relinquished and offered, right? So Arahant is an enlightened being, right? So if you're making offerings to an enlightened being, this is very helpful for you. It's not any kind of mystical or magical thing. It's that if you're coming in contact with an enlightened being and you're able to make offerings to that person, then that means you're also able to ask them questions about what is it that they did in order to be able to progress on the path to enlightenment, right? You can ask them questions about the wisdom that it takes to be able to train your mind and cultivate the mind. That's the real benefit here. And even just being able to know how to determine whether someone is an arahant or not, you're going to need to have certain wisdom. So there's teachings that you're going to see in this book that I'll just kind of talk about now a little bit, since it relates to this chapter, is that the Buddha understood that someone who's new to the path to enlightenment could potentially have difficulties determining who is enlightened and who isn't enlightened, because there's a lot of details that you need to be able to observe in someone's mind and in their practice to be able to determine whether someone's enlightened or not. So he gave you kind of like a shortcut way of giving you kind of an indication that someone may or may not be enlightened. And of course, your goal isn't to go around and judge people to determine if they're enlightened or not. But if you're making offerings to people, you would like to be sure that they're either enlightened or close to it in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing for the realization of one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, because this is going to allow you to come in contact with people that can actually help you to be able to make your way to enlightenment through cultivating wisdom. So what he describes is, he says essentially to look at the person's mind and see if they're muddle-minded. This is a phrase that he uses. Muddle-minded means that they're lacking concentration. Because if somebody isn't practicing the teachings closely, then that means that they have pollution in their mind and they're going to be muddle-minded, meaning they're going to lack concentration, focus, and clarity when they're talking about the teachings or they're discussing certain things. They're going to stumble over their words. They're not going to be able to keep a straight thought about what it is that they're sharing and helping people to understand, because they're muddle-minded, right? So he describes that you look at the quality of someone's mind. So if you see someone whose mind is focused, concentrated, having clarity, deep memory, they can speak about the teachings with ease, there's the potential that this person is either enlightened or very close to it, because they don't have much pollution in their mind. When there's pollution in the mind, there's going to be a lack of concentration and focus and clarity. Another thing that you can look at is if you can see if someone's agitated or frustrated or angry or bitter or harsh or hostile. These types of things are indication that there's still pollution in the mind as well. So you'd like to look for individuals who are practicing in this way, but you'd also like to look at their moral conduct as well. If you saw someone who was doing unwise things, like maybe they're gambling, or they're using drugs and alcohol, or maybe, they're hitting animals and being abusive and demanding and controlling, putting expectations on people and things like this, you know that this person isn't enlightened or close to it. Or if you see someone who's doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, then you know that they're not actually in even the first stage of enlightenment. So it would be unwise to support these kinds of things, because if you're making offerings to these kinds of individuals, then you're supporting those kinds of things. If there's a certain ordained practitioner or teacher who's into drugs and alcohol, into gambling, or they're being self-indulgent in the types of things that they use their donations for, if you see all these kinds of things, you're supporting that kind of thing. And you would like to see that whoever you're supporting with your offerings, that they're using a certain portion of those to be able to support themselves in their own life, but then they're also doing things that are offering help for other people to be able to learn and grow in the teachings. You could see that the offerings that are being made to that individual as a teacher, that it's for the benefit of the community. That sure, that teacher is using a certain portion of those offerings for themselves, but you should see that they're also helping to grow the community and building up the community with the things that are needed in order to help share the teachings with others. So these are some of the indications of things that you would like to look for. The Buddha talks about here that an individual who's practicing this generosity is not held back. The wholesome persons give what is hard to give. Okay, so if something is hard for you to give, that means you have craving. That means your mind's attached to it. You don't want to share it with other people. You're holding on to it. It's mine, 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 mine. So you need to get to the point where you're not held back by that. In fact, when you see your mind is having a hard time giving something, that you actually make extra effort and determination to share that thing. Okay. So there's many different things that you might come across in your day-to-day life that you find it hard to give and share. Maybe you're noticing that when your jewelry is misplaced, like your watch or your earrings or your ring, maybe you can't find it in your home. Maybe you're noticing your mind is all shaken up by that. You can see your mind is discontent, that you have craving, desire, attachment here. And the idea of letting somebody else wear your jewelry or even giving it away is very hard for you to fathom, because maybe there's a certain amount of money that it took for you to acquire this, or maybe there's certain sentimental value associated with this jewelry, and you find it very hard to share that with others. You're going to need to actually share it with others in order to be able to train your mind to let go and get to enlightenment. So you might either, if this jewelry is not very expensive, you might choose to give it away, right? And just give it to people. Or if it's expensive and you can't afford to give it away, maybe there's people that you trust that you could actually let them wear it. Maybe like a family member or a friend or someone who's close to you, right? You could just trust them to wear it for a few weeks so that it's out of your hands and you're not holding on to it, craving permanence. If you're noticing that when your clothing comes out of the washing machine and it's ripped and torn, you're discontent, you know that you have craving, desire, attachment to your clothing, and you would like to start sharing your clothing. Start giving away some of your clothing. This is going to help your mind to let go. At one time here in our house, my son was attached to popcorn. During COVID, we ended up ordering some popcorn from the movie theater, and he got this big tub of popcorn. And it was one of the first times he ever had popcorn, and he ate it in like one day. And then the very next day, he was like, Dad, I want some more popcorn. Can you order more popcorn? And it was not inexpensive, right? So it was from the movie theater. So I knew that this kid was having a craving for popcorn. So I learned how to pop popcorn on our stovetop. And I went out and bought kernels, and I bought all the supplies, and I learned how to pop this popcorn. And I did it for many weeks and many months. And eventually I taught him how to do it so that he could actually do it on his own, and he didn't involve me. So for a very long time, there was lots of popcorn being popped here in our house. He was eating popcorn almost daily. Well, after about 2 or 3 months of this, I saw that his mind was attached to this and he was having craving. So one of the things I suggested to him is that he popped up a bunch of popcorn and then he bag it up and he give it away to some of his friends in the village. So that's what he did, is he popped up a bunch of popcorn, he bagged it up in these little bags, and then he went around and delivered it to his friends in the village. He gave away like 4, 5, 6 different bags. And this helps to train your mind to let go. So anything that you see your mind's attached to, you're going to need to train to practice generosity, where you're giving and sharing that particular thing. And it might be hard for you to do that. Because when I first recommended that to my son about giving and sharing the popcorn, I recall that he was like, yeah, Dad, but what about us? We're not going to have popcorn for us if I give it away to all my friends. And I was like, well, we can go buy some more. Don't worry, son. It's not very expensive. It's only 60 baht per kilo, which is like $2 per kilo. And I was like, it's okay. We'll get some more. You know, you can pop all of it and give it away, all of it, if you like. And then he felt more comfortable to do it. But it was challenging for him. He wasn't quite sure. And even when he bagged it up, he was like, I'm not quite sure if I would like to go give this to my friends. I was like, well, it's going to help your mind if you do. So eventually he decided to go do it. And he rode his bike around and he gave out his little popcorn. It was a very cute thing, right? But it was training his mind to let go. So you're going to have things that are hard to give away. And your mind's going to want to be holding on. And that's all the more reason to do it. If you're noticing when your bank account's up high, you get so happy and excited. And when it goes down, you're frustrated and annoyed. You're going to need to share your money with some other people. And you're going to need to find ways to do that. What the Buddha teaches is that the frequency of giving is actually more important than the amount. If you're going to give $500 once a year to an orphanage, that's not going to have nearly as much impact as if you give $1 a day. This is going to be much helpful for your mind, much more helpful, because you're having to get rid of and let go more and more and more. You're having to let go of this more and more frequently. Whereas if you just practice that generosity once a year, your mind's not having as much opportunity to let go, let go, let go, let go. So you'd like to have multiple opportunities where your mind can let go. So oftentimes in different places, you'll see donation boxes around in like maybe a convenience store or a department store or a restaurant or things like that. If you're going to say give $5 in a day, it would actually be better to give $1, $1, $1, $1, because 5 times during your day, you had to let go, let go, let go. So this is what you would like to do, is implement generosity where you're frequently giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. Understanding that the frequency is more important than the amount. And you can actually do this in a way that it's easy for you. So say if I was going to the market to buy some mangoes for myself, and now I show up at the market and I see there's some bananas there too. And I'm like, my neighbor actually likes bananas. I'm going to toss some bananas in there and get those as well, right? It only takes you an extra 30 seconds to toss the bananas in there, and now you can practice generosity. So you don't have to go like way out of your way to practice generosity. You can just integrate it into your life, that it becomes a normal part of your life. Or say you're going to the store and you're buying yourself a chocolate bar. Maybe you buy 1 or 2 extras for other people, and maybe you know who you're going to give it away to, or maybe you don't even know who you're going to give this chocolate bar away to, but you know you're getting one for yourself, and you like to also get 1 or 2 for somebody else. And now at some point during your day, when you encounter someone, you're going to be able to give them a chocolate bar because you have one on standby. So this will take you all of a few extra seconds to pick up that extra chocolate bar to be able to give it away to people. So you would like to be able to integrate generosity into your life where you're frequently giving, but you're also doing it in such a way that it's almost seamless and straightforward and so integrated into your life that you're not having to spend an extra 3 hours per day just to practice generosity, right? So you'd like to make it so that it can be frequent like that in your day-to-day life. So the Buddha goes on here and he talks about, different things related to generosity. But I thought I would share these things with you because you're going to see these things as part of the teachings of the Buddha in terms of practice of your generosity. And while it would be wise to practice generosity with people who are in the life of sharing the teachings with others who are either enlightened or close to it, you're going to need to practice generosity with other people too. Your friends, your family, your coworkers. These people aren't necessarily going to be enlightened or on the path to enlightenment, but you can still practice generosity with them, and it's going to help to enhance the quality of your mind. Now, when the Buddha talks about the benefit of generosity, he does talk about it's more beneficial to make offerings who are people who are either in one of the 4 stages or practicing for one of the 4 stages, but there's still benefit in you practicing generosity, even with an animal. If you practice generosity with an animal, there's benefit there too. It's just not as beneficial as if you shared with people who are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, because those people then have the ability to then share the teachings with others, and you have the ability to be able to get wisdom from those individuals, to be able to understand the path to enlightenment, and then cultivate your mind on the path as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, it looks like Leo might have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I think the what you mentioned with the clothes, giving away the clothes. I think it's a good point. I think I have attachment or craving for some trousers and also some pullover. For example, I have white t-shirts. I almost have white t-shirts, so there's no big attachment, right? Because it's all the same. But trousers and pullovers. So I think this would be a good training to let this go. But I don't have so many trousers and pullovers, and I think it would be hard to give a trousers away, which costed 70 euros, for example, or whatever amount. So I would struggle with that. So is this maybe something I put aside and would maybe in a year when I have a better income and there's a possibility to do it? I mean, I would like to quench this or delete this craving because it's there. But
this is where you need to practice the middle way, and you need to be able to discern that for yourself. I can't tell you where your middle is. You need to be able to discover that for yourself. So depending on your income, depending on your resources and what you have available to you in terms of clothing and the ability to purchase new clothing, you're going to need to figure out, when is the right time for you to let go, because obviously it sounds like this is something that you're attached to, and you're going to need to let that go at some point. And you need to figure out when's the best time for you. Nobody can tell you that.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else, so I'm going to move to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Chapter 8. Okay, looks like Leo. Go ahead, sir. Oh, we have Martha and Alberto in there too. Let me get them, Leo, because they volunteered last time and I skipped over them.
The way leading to wealth. Malika. And still some woman is not prone to anger or often exasperated. Even if she is criticized a lot, she does not lose her temper and become irritated, hostile, or stubborn. She does not display anger, hatred, and bitterness. And she gives things to ascetics and Brahmins, food and drink, clothing and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, dwellings, and lighting. When she passes away from the state, if she comes back to this world, whenever she is reborn, she is beautiful, attractive, and graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion, rich with great wealth and property, and influential. This is the way, student, that leads to wealth. Namely, one gives food, drink, clothing, vehicles, garlands, scents, ointments, beds, dwelling, and lamps to ascetics and Brahmins.
Okay, thank you, Martha. So here, the Buddha is once again explaining that if you're practicing generosity, it's going to lead to this rebirth where there's potential for wealth. Again, that's not the goal of the path to enlightenment, but this is what can occur. And this actually did occur for this individual. And it's not only just rebirth that you can experience this wealth, it's in the current life as well. This individual was actually a female household practitioner that the Buddha is talking to. She actually started out very meagerly, kind of like having very minimal resources. And she started learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. She became a very rich and wealthy person during her life. And there's even reports that she actually became a queen, that she ended up marrying a king, even though she started out with a very basic life. And so this individual, Malachi, actually ended up seeing the truth that through practicing giving and sharing, that this individual was able to improve their wealth. And of course, that's not the goal of practicing generosity. If you give and share and your goal is to get rich, you're not going to be able to do that. There was one time I was in America, I was at a temple, and this Thai lady came over to me and said, hey, I see you're practicing the teachings of the Buddha, and I need you to talk to my husband. I said, okay, what do you need me to talk about? She said, he's really confused about the teachings of the Buddha, and I think you're someone who can explain it to him. And I said, okay, sure, I'll go talk to him. So she brings me over to her husband, and her husband says, I have a question for you. He said, I gave $2,500 to the temple, and I haven't gotten any money back yet. I want to know, like, I gave this 2,500 baht or $2,500. You know, shouldn't I be getting like $5,000, $10,000 back by now? Shouldn't I see it coming back to me? This is why I gave the $2,500, right? So I needed to explain to him that that's not how this works, that he had this expectation and he should have never give with the expectation of getting something in return. That's not pure generosity. So this individual that the Buddha is talking to, this female household practitioner, she was practicing a lot of generosity during her life. And not only did she become rich and wealthy and potentially a queen, which is what is reported, but there's also reports that she was very stable and steady in her mind, that there's discussion that it's almost like she was either enlightened or very close to it because her mind wasn't easily shaken up by anything at all. So she was, quite admired that she wasn't having a temper or irritated, hostile, or stubborn, as is talking about here with the Buddha. So giving and sharing is what's going to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, along with all the other teachings that the Buddha is sharing. This is just one mechanism that's helping you. And it can produce wealth and it can produce an improved rebirth. But the ultimate goal is to get to the elimination of discontentedness. That's the ultimate goal. And that's what generosity is helping you to do, is to be able to train your mind to let go. And when you practice generosity, you're going to need to practice generosity equally among all the people that you are spending time with. So for example, if using that work example, if you had 8 coworkers and you were bringing in 2 donuts for your very best friends at work, and you give out those 2 donuts to your best friends, those other 6 coworkers, they're going to get jealous. They're going to get envious because they're not on the path to enlightenment potentially. And they don't realize that those painful feelings of jealousy that is arising is coming from their own mind. They're going to attribute their painful feelings to you. They're going to think you're the one who's causing them to experience that. And they're either going to push you aside, they're going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, or they're going to start putting their expectations on you and trying to control you. And one of the ways that you make sure that this doesn't occur, because it's nice to be around people who are friendly and polite and respectful and that aren't bitter and harsh and hostile, even though you know that they're causing their own discontentedness, you can practice in a way that this doesn't occur, where when you're practicing generosity, you bring in 8 donuts so that way everybody has an opportunity to get a donut, right? And now you're not in that situation where people are becoming jealous and envious. Even though their mind's causing it themselves, you would like to practice in a way that it doesn't allow this to occur. But let's just say you work in an office of like 300 people. You're probably not going to be able to afford to give away 300 donuts or 300 bagels or 300 bananas or something like that. So what you do is you practice generosity to the level that you can. And let's just say you can afford 20 donuts. And what you do is you put them in an office, like a conference room, and you send out an email to everybody, said, hey, I just got back from lunch. I brought back 20 donuts. They're in the conference room. Anybody who would like to get one, you're more than welcome, first come, first serve, right? So now those first 20 people get a donut. But the 21st person, maybe I'm that 21st person who took my time. I was checking some emails. I was talking on the phone. I stopped by the bathroom, did a bunch of things. And then I came into the conference room and, all the donuts are gone. Well, at least I can see that was my decisions that led to that. So now if I'm frustrated or agitated because the donuts aren't there, I understand that it's my decisions, that you were practicing generosity where you were giving and sharing with everybody equally. You made these 20 donuts available to everybody, and it was each individual person's choice of whether or not they got those donuts or not. And this is the way that you can practice generosity in a large work environment, and you don't have to run the risk of people getting jealous or envious that you didn't practice generosity with them, because you did. You practiced generosity with 300 people. They all had the opportunity to get a donut, but it was only the first 20 who were actually able to get one. So you'd like to be making sure that you practice equanimity or treating everybody fairly. That goes along with your generosity. And whether it's like children, if you have 2 or 3 children, you would like to practice generosity equally with them too. When I was growing up, if it was my sister's birthday and we were going to my grandmother's house and they were going to give her gifts, they would actually have a gift or 2 for me too. This was wonderful, right? That I grew up, that my sister's birthday, and she was getting all these gifts, but I got 1 or 2 or 3 gifts myself, even though it was her birthday. And then she would do the same thing for my sister as well, that if it was my birthday, my sister would get a few gifts. But then, of course, once you got about 12 or 13 years old, that kind of faded away. And if it was my birthday, then I got a gift. And if it was her birthday, she got a gift. But young, when you're early in life like this, you don't have a lot of wisdom. Like when we were 4 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, we didn't have that wisdom. So if we were to allow our minds to stay wired with this jealousy that when sister's birthday, she gets all these gifts and I get nothing, then the mind stays wired that way to be jealous. But my grandmother wisely practiced in such a way that they didn't allow our mind to get wired that way. But then ultimately, by the time we were 12, 13, or 14, when that went away, we were then old enough to be able to train our mind not to be jealous of the other person getting gifts. So these are the kinds of things that you can do where you treat all your children equally, but then you would also like to make space for your children to be able to learn that they're not going to always get a gift, right? And this is helpful for everyone's mind. So here the Buddha is describing the practice of generosity and how it leads to this improved wealth. And this particular household practitioner was able to see that it led to wealth in their current life and even becoming influential, where this person is reported to have become a queen during their lifetime. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. So it looks like Miriam has a question in Zoom. She says, back to giving, how about giving money to beggars waiting at red lights, holding signs, saying they're homeless and need food, but will probably buy drugs or alcohol? Are as there are many places where one can get free meal or a bag of groceries around town, I know I feel guilty and somewhat judgmental when I ignore them. Maybe they have a reason not to go to the shelters and food. So for me, when people are on the street, I do not give money. I will give food, clothing, things like this. I've even taken people into restaurants and sat down with them and bought them a meal and had a conversation with them, but I don't usually give them money for some of the reasons that you share, that there could be alcohol or drug addiction there. I don't know with 100% certainty. So the Buddha teaches you to, as you're practicing any of the teachings, they're all based on discernment. That's the foundation of everything the Buddha is teaching you, is wise decision making and discernment. And you would always like to make your decisions based in truth and things that you know to be true. So just giving money to someone who's on the street, you don't necessarily know 100% of where that's going to. So if you're going to practice, what I would recommend for you is to not give money, is to give food, clothing, and things like this that are actually going to be helpful for that person. And you know exactly where the resources are going to. Now, that person might get that pizza and they might go sell it to somebody and actually then get money to be able to buy their drugs, right? You can't control that. That's their decision. But at least you've created this best opportunity for that person to be able to eat that food and be able to benefit from it. So you're not interested in ever judging people or looking down on them, but you're also looking to try to create the best opportunity for them to be able to experience using those resources in a helpful way. If you're feeling guilty for not giving something to somebody, that's your craving, desire, attachment, and you're going to need to eliminate that. So what I would encourage somebody to do who's feeling guilty when they don't give to a homeless person is to regularly not give to homeless people. And you're going to need to do that for a period of time, for multiple months, to train your mind to not experience that guilt. And then once you get past that, where you've been able to not give to a homeless person multiple times, and you see that there's no guilt in the mind, then you might choose to give. Right? But if you're noticing guilt in that situation, that means that you have craving, desire, attachment there. And you'd like to get rid of that by exposing the mind to the very thing that it doesn't feel comfortable with, which is the not giving. So that's what I would suggest you do. And then, of course, you're talking about judgmental here. You're not interested in judging people. And one of the ways that this can help you is that the Buddha teaches you that whenever you're experiencing or you're seeing somebody experience something that is unfortunate or they're experiencing some misfortune, he reminds you that because you've had so many previous countless lives, that you too have experienced those same misfortunes, either in this life or some previous life. So just because you see someone who's homeless or having difficulties with drugs and alcohol, what the Buddha reminds you is that you've had those same exact challenges in the past as well, either in this life or some previous life. And that will help you to not be judgmental and looking down on people, because you might be at a different point in your life at this particular time in your life, but this person is in a different place. And that's just impermanence. And rather than looking down on that person or being judgmental, we can just understand that, hey, we were in that place too. And this is kind of, our opportunity to now potentially practice some generosity to help that person. But it's also important to keep in mind that you can't feed somebody out of hunger. It's not possible for you to feed somebody out of hunger. Because say, for example, I'm feeding this homeless person regularly, day by day by day by day by day, and now this person gets attached to me for food. I haven't actually helped them to solve their problem, because they still don't have the ability to acquire resources on their own. If they're attached to me for food, I am impermanent in their life. And now when I go away, they don't have the ability to get food. So the thing that's going to really truly help this person is wisdom. They need to have wisdom of being able to make wise decisions to be able to acquire the resources that they need in order to sustain their life. We can't feed people out of hunger. We can't feed people out of poverty. Right? We can't do that because those individuals are lacking resources based on decisions that they're making. They're going to need to be able to make improved decisions in order to be able to get the resources that they need. So at the same time that we might be practicing generosity to help this person get the resources that they need to sustain their life, it's also helpful to see if we can somehow integrate some ability for them to cultivate wisdom in the same situation, whether it's giving them a book or offering them the ability to cultivate some wisdom in some other way. Because, of course, we're not interested in giving unsolicited guidance, but there's ways to kind of maybe potentially help this person to be able to make the choice to cultivate some wisdom, because you can't feed somebody out of hunger. You can't feed somebody out of poverty. It's just not possible. They need to make the choices themselves to be able to move beyond that. And of course, there's things like generational poverty and things like this that are very challenging to overcome. It can take many years to be able to overcome those kinds of things. But if the individual is just reliant on us or one individual for food and clothing and shelter and medical care, then they're not actually going to be able to move past that poverty that they're experiencing. So this can maybe help you to eliminate that guilt. It can help you to eliminate some of the judgment that might be in the mind and help you to move beyond that. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Maybe Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, actually, about the thing with the homeless person, I thought about what is the best way to say no without saying no, maybe. Because I had it actually here in Thailand, which is rare that people are homeless here, but there was this person coming to me and I didn't want to give him money, so I bought him some food. And after that, he didn't speak really well English, but he somehow made clear, or he somehow asked if I have something more for him, money or something. And also, I think 2 or 3 days later, I met him again, and he asked again for something. And in both situations, I said, like, I shake my head and was like, no, with the hands, like. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really know how, if this is a good response, or is it maybe, is this shaking the head somehow like a no? So I wasn't really sure what is the best way here. Is it good just to ignore him? Because I don't want to give him all the time food, because then maybe he gets attached to that and he comes again and again. And so it was one time I did it, but I didn't intend to do it again. Yeah, how would you respond to the person?
Is there just one best way to do these kinds of things?
What ways you wouldn't do? Like saying no, I think this would be unwise, because people don't like this no, right? Shaking their head and doing this, would you say this is also unwise? Because people get angry?
Is there just one best way to do these kinds of things?
No.
Okay. So there's not just one best way to do these kinds of things. Each situation is going to be different, and you're going to need to make a decision in the present moment of what you think is wise. For me, in most situations, if someone is coming to me and asking me for something like that, I don't typically respond to that. I usually just keep walking. But there's some situations where I can see somebody's really in dire straits and they really need help, and they might even be coming to me and asking for help. And then I will let them know, because I speak Thai, I will let them know if they wait right there, I will go get them some food and come back. Or I will let them know that if they would like to come to a restaurant, I can get them some food. And sometimes they're like, no, I don't want food. I want money. Do you have money? And I'll say, unfortunately, I can't give you money, but I can help you with food if that's what you'd like. And sometimes they're like, okay, I'll go get food. And then they'll come with me sometimes, and even I'll get the food. And then after I give them food, they still say, money, I want money, I want money. And then I just say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to do that. And then I will walk away. And just let them be there. And they'll sometimes be really begging, and you can see they're craving. And sometimes you need to just walk away politely and smile why to them, and then just walk away.
All right.
All right. You're welcome, Miriam. Pleased to help you. All right. I don't see any other questions anywhere, so we're going to move to chapter 9. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Leo.
The generous one would surpass the other. Here, when it was there might be 2 disciples of the perfectly enlightened one, equal in confidence, virtuous behavior, and wisdom. But one is generous while the other is not. the break up of the body after death, they would both be born in a good destination in a heavenly world. When they have become heavenly beings, would there be any distinction of difference between them? There would be, Sumana. The perfect enlightened one said, the generous one, having become a heavenly being, would surpass the other in 5 ways. In heavenly lifespan, heavenly beauty, heavenly happiness, heavenly glory, and heavenly authority. The generous one, having become a heavenly being, would surpass the other in these 5 ways. But when it was if these two pass away from there and again become human beings, would there still be some distinction or difference between them? There would be, Sumana. Perfectly enlightened one said, when they again become human being, the generous one would surpass the other in 5 ways. In human lifespan, human beauty, human happiness, human fame, and human authority. When they again become human beings, the generous one would surpass the other in these 5 ways. But Venerable Sir, if these two should go forth from the household life into homelessness, would there still be some distinction or difference between them? There would be, Sumana. Perfectly enlightened one said, the generous one, having gone forth, would surpass the other in 5 ways. First, he would usually use a robe that has been specifically offered to him. Seldom one that had not been specifically offered to him. Second, he would usually eat alms food that has been specifically offered to him. Seldom alms food that had not been specifically offered to him. 3, he would usually use a lodging that had been specifically offered to him, seldom one that had not been specifically offered to him. 4, he would usually use medicines and supplies for the sick that had been specifically offered to him, seldom those that had not been specifically offered to him. 5, his fellow monastics, those with whom he resides, usually behave towards him in agreeable ways by bodily, verbal, and mental action, seldom in disagreeable ways. They would usually present him what is agreeable, seldom what is disagreeable. The generous one, having gone forth, would surpass the other in these 5 ways. But Venerable Sir, if both attain arahantship, would there still be some distinction or difference between them after they have attained arahantship? In this case, Sumana, I declare, there would be no difference between the liberation of one and the liberation of the other. It's outstanding and amazing, Venerable Sir. Truly, one has good reason to give alms and do meritorious deeds, since they will be helpful if one becomes a heavenly being, again becomes a human being, or goes forth. So it is, Sumana. So it is, Sumana. Truly, one has good reason to give alms and to do meritorious deeds, since they will be helpful if one becomes a heavenly being, again becomes a human being, or goes forth. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this: as the standless moon, moving through the sphere of space, outshines with its radiance all the stars in the world, so one accomplished in virtuous behavior, a person endowed with confidence, outshines by generosity all the selfish people in the world. As the 100-peaked rain cloud, thundering, covered in lightning, pours down rain on the earth, overwhelming the plains and lowlands, so the perfectly enlightened one's disciples, the wise one accomplished in vision, surpasses the selfish person in 5 specific respects: lifespan and glory, beauty and peacefulness. Possessed of wealth after death, he rejoices in heaven.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So here you can see the Buddha describing how generosity and the benefits of generosity actually continue as you go forward into future rebirths. And the reason why is because the craving has been reduced, right? If you're reducing craving in one life, now when you're in the next life, there's less craving. right? And if you're reducing craving in that life through practicing generosity, then there's less craving in the next life, right? So the Buddha is showing you how this generosity is improving what you experience, not only in this life, but in future lives as well. But ultimately, the question gets to, if these two people become arahantship, or they're arahants or enlightened, is there any difference? And the answer is, of course, no, because they're both liberated. Their minds both have completely been purified. They're both generous by this point. By the time they get to enlightenment, they're both generous. So what they've done in the past and what's leading to their enlightenment is they're both going to need to practice generosity in order to get to enlightened mental state. But once they're enlightened, they're both already practicing generosity by that point. That's why there's no difference between them. Their liberation is the same. They're both experiencing complete peace and complete joy. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this continuation of benefits through the reduction of pollution of mind. You can understand whenever he's talking about generosity, that's what he's talking about, is the reduction and ultimate elimination of discontentedness through eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And that benefit's going to continue to go forward as you're being reborn. So potentially, you guys have been generous in previous lives. And now in this life, you're also maybe practicing a certain amount of generosity. And now this is going to help you more and more and more get to the point where the mind's ultimately enlightened. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, just one more chapter for today. This is chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? Okay, Chris, go ahead, sir.
If beings knew the results of giving and sharing. Monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their mind. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there were someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. If beings knew what the perfectly enlightened one said, how the result of sharing has such great fruit, then, subduing the stain of selfishness with brightened awareness, they give in season to the noble ones, where a gift brings great fruit. Having given food as an offering to those worthy of offerings, many donors, when they pass away from here, the human state, go to heaven. They, having gone to heaven, rejoice, having enjoyed sensual pleasures. Unselfish, they take part in the result of sharing.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So it's important to keep in mind that when you're learning about generosity, that the Buddha was a prince. He was destined to become a king. He was already very rich and very wealthy, and becoming a king, he would have been even more rich and more wealthy. But he chose to step away from that, and he lived a life of homelessness, where he lived alongside of his students. His students would invite them into their home, and they would provide him food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. The currency at the time was gold and silver, and he didn't accept those things as offerings. He didn't accept land or anything like this that was part of becoming wealthy. He only accepted the things that it took for him to sustain his life: food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. So this was possible during his life because he lived right alongside of his students. But nowadays, that's not the case. Teachers don't live alongside of their students, so we actually need to accept a certain amount of financial support because we need to pay the water company, we need to pay the electric company, we need to do these kinds of things, we need to purchase computers and microphones and lights and things like this. So we do accept financial support, but the mind can be trained to not be attached to that. So the Buddha, whenever he's talking about generosity, and particularly when he's talking about giving and sharing with him or the ordained practitioners or teachers, it's important that you don't allow any conditioning of your mind to kick in, because you might have seen situations where people were using teachings like Buddhism or Christianity or other teachings to enrich themselves. This is something that you'll see in the world, that people tend to do this. And that's really unfortunate when people are doing that. But here in Thailand, they take this very seriously. There was a case several years ago where an individual was ordained and they were accepting donations and they were indulging in spending that for themselves. They were, of course, purchasing things like Gucci sunglasses, Fendi bags. They were flying on private jets chartered around Thailand, and they were sharing this on Facebook and Instagram and all this kind of stuff. So the Thai people were seeing what they were doing, and they actually sent the police to go arrest this person. This person left, and they actually went to the USA. They put out an Interpol warrant for this person. They had the US police arrest them, and they were extradited back into Thailand. They went through the court system and they were found guilty of fraud, and they were sentenced to 20 years in prison, right? So this is how serious the Thai people take these kinds of things, that they understand that if somebody's giving and sharing with the temple or ordained practitioners, teachers, that person is going to use a certain portion of that for themselves, but then they're going to also help the community as well. So don't allow any conditioning of your mind that you've seen these kinds of events that occur to think that that's why the Buddha is teaching you to practice generosity, because this discourse right here is ultimately getting to the heart of why he's teaching you to practice generosity. He says, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there was someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. So what is the results of giving and sharing that the Buddha knows that other people don't know? What he's talking about here is the peacefulness and joy of the enlightened mental state. Because beings do not know, as I know, the peacefulness and joy of the enlightened mental state, and that it's generosity that leads to that enlightened mental state, the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. But if they knew how peaceful and joyful that enlightened mental state is, and that it's generosity that's going to lead to that, they would not eat without having shared it, if there was someone to share it with. That's what the Buddha is talking about here. There's other places in his discourses where he says it very clearly about how generosity is the practice of enhancing the quality of the mind. And you guys will see that in this book. But this particular discourse is also getting at the heart of this as well, of what is the real purpose of generosity. It's to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful. But because people don't know that enlightened mental state and they don't know generosity leads to it, they tend to not practice generosity. One of the things that I think about sometimes is that, if everybody in the world could just experience enlightenment for like 1 minute or even 1 second, or even say a few days, and could see how impactful that is to their life and their mind, they would not let any obstacle stand in their way, right, of getting back to that enlightened mental state. So if everybody could just taste it for a little bit, and then now they had to do the work to actually get to it, they would not let anything stand in their way. It's kind of like if you were to taste chocolate and then everything was removed from you, could never have chocolate ever again. It's kind of like, where's chocolate? How can I find this chocolate? I'd like to be able to figure out how to get back to this chocolate, right? It's the same kind of thing with enlightenment. So that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see here, is that it's generosity that leads to this peaceful and joyful mental state. And it's unfortunate that people don't know how peaceful that is, and that it's generosity that leads to it, because this stain of selfishness obsesses one's mind. And this is a great way to explain it, is this stain of selfishness, because it is a pollution of mind. That's the craving, desire, attachment, that it doesn't allow the mind to have this brightened awareness. That's what the enlightened mental state is, that when you eliminate the pollutions of mind, there's this radiance, this brightness, this joy, this gladness, this cheerfulness in the mind. But as long as the mind's burdened with the stain of selfishness or any other stains of pollutions of mind, the mind can't experience that brightened awareness. So part of what you're doing, and you'd like to integrate into your life very easily in the way that I've shared with you, where you're frequently practicing generosity and doing that with, just integrating it into your life and making it so easy without any expectation of anything in return. Those are the kinds of things you'd like to do. Sure, occasionally you might come out of your house and you see that your neighbor's trash is blown all over their yard, and maybe they're in another country, maybe they're vacationing. So maybe you take 5 or 10 minutes to clean up their trash, bag it up and put it away. And maybe because you're practicing to not have any expectation of anything in return, maybe you don't even share with them that that's what you did. You just did it because you know it's a wise thing to do and to enhance the quality of your mind, that you don't even tell them about it so that they don't even have the opportunity to say thank you. That way you know you're practicing pure generosity. Sometimes you're going to need to do those kinds of things, or maybe you go visit an orphanage for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, or you help out at a homeless shelter. Maybe you do those kinds of things sometimes, and that's a way to really practice a large amount of generosity. But also, you can integrate generosity into your day-to-day life, where you can be frequently giving and sharing, more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. And this is what's going to help eliminate that stain of selfishness. You're going to need to train your mind regularly to let go, let go, let go, let go, let go. That's what the meditation's doing. That's what all the other factors on the Eightfold Path is doing. But that's also what the generosity is doing as well. So let me know if you guys have a question here on this particular discourse. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is end class just by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to grow and learn and develop on the path. Thank you for those of you guys that read. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for just participating and being interested to learn and practice the teachings. Next week, we're going to be in our next 10 chapters, which is chapter 11 through 20. You can read those ahead of time because you guys know you have the words of the Buddha, you have words from me, you have the references. You can study these and more deeply bring them into your mind, because I don't have the ability to teach in class everything that I put into the books. So if you're reading the books and attending the classes, this is what's going to be most helpful for you, because you can glean the full understanding of what it is that I'm sharing in the books. If you can only come to class, great, then you come to class. But if you can also read the books too, this is going to be most helpful for you. So next week, we're going to be doing the next 10 chapters. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 19 of this first book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Chapter 19 is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where we're going to learn about the life story of the Buddha in these 3 periods of time that tend to be very difficult for you. And when you see people that are close to you experiencing sickness, aging, and death, this can be a really challenging time for you. So we're going to talk about the life story of the Buddha in these 3 situations to be able to help you to not experience discontentedness when you're experiencing sickness, aging, and death, or the people around you are. And then on Wednesday, of course, I do meditation with students and then open up to whatever questions you guys have. So have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.